But hopefully Margie Pettis was able to have her surgery. Right. Yeah. All right, well, we will continue in our lesson that we started Sunday. We got not quite halfway finished, so maybe we can finish the rest of this one out tonight and go on to another topic Sunday. But we are looking at Christian evidences, and we started our discussion in maybe a kind of a different way, but we wanted to talk about, I wanted to talk about those who don't believe in God and how atheism is limited. There's people who don't believe in God at all, and they have to explain things somehow in their mind if they don't believe in a all-powerful, supernatural being that we know exists, and we're confident and have faith that exists, but that God exists. But nevertheless, they don't have that in their arsenal. It's important for us to try to teach them, but knowing that it's a little different to try to teach them, because if they're truly not religious in any form or fashion, they reject the Word. We can't just tell them Scriptures. We can't just read them Scriptures because they don't believe it. Yeah, that's great. That's a great book you're reading to me. Maybe that kind of attitude they would have. But we can challenge them with things like we're looking at, and we talked about how atheism cannot explain morality, and humans have morals. Humans have morality. It varies. Some people have more morality than others, but there's this sense with all humans typically that this is just not right. Well, where did that come from? If it didn't come from a source, and it did, it came from God, where does it come from? If we started as a one-celled amoeba and we slowly trudged our way to where we are now, at what point and how did we develop morality? They can't even explain how we physically developed into the being that we are through evolution, and they certainly cannot explain they can't explain morality. So we won't go back through all that, but we got to the second point, that atheism cannot explain life. The atheist has no explanation for life. And what they try to come up with separating God from being the creator and being the force for the creation, their choices are very limited, and they throw these things out like the earth's billions of years old, and things just had all this time to simmer, and everything just went right, and there was this event, and boom, this happened, and boom, that happened. It's a ridiculous show of faith for somebody to try to even believe and try to explain that. And we talked about that a bit Sunday, how much faith they've got to have in stupidity to try to believe some of these things. But they will, and you hear people trying to explain it all the time. So there's only two choices about life. Life came from an all-powerful being that we know, that's what happened, from God. Or life did not come from an all-powerful being, and it just happened over a period of time. But even back to the very beginning, they would say there was matter. Where did that come from? We'll get to that. But in talking about life, how did life begin out of this matter that you claim existed? How did life spring from dirt or from any of the elements? How did life do that? It hasn't ever happened in our lifetime. No scientific study has ever been able to generate life from non-life. You can take a bowl of whatever element we have in this world, and you can put it in a Petri dish. You can do all kinds of things to it. You can run electricity through it. You can pour chemicals on it. You can do anything you want to do to it, and it never, ever, ever will create a living entity. It's what it is. It's matter. So while they cannot explain where the matter came from, and that's what we'll get to next, they certainly can explain life. And it's pathetic when you hear the explanations. What do you hear from those who want to take God out of the picture for us being here? What do you hear? Y'all have been to school. Y'all have had college professors. You've heard intellectuals talk through this stuff and really sound like they know things. But what do we usually hear in trying to explain life outside of God? That's where they go for the universe, and we're going to get to that. So hang on to that. That's what happened to begin with. But we're kind of doing it backwards, actually. We probably should have done the universe and then life, but we're kind of going backwards. But what do they usually? How did we get here as a life form? Yeah, the Big Bang. That's how matter separated, and that's how the Earth began, and all that they would say. But what about us? What about life? How did that happen? How do they explain that? The theory of evolution, they try to explain it with that. So what do they say? How did life begin? It started with a single cell thing, similar to an amoeba. From nothing now. Now, if you take all these elements in this world and you mix them up and do all these things, you will never create a one-celled amoeba. You won't. Yeah. Yeah. What caused? There's a law that life cannot come from non-life. That's a law. And a law is something that's proven to be the same every single time. So there is a law that life does not come from non-life. Just like the law of gravity. If you get up here on this roof and you step off of it 1,000 times, how many times are you going to hit the ground? 1,000 times. Well, you probably won't. You'll die on about the 4th or 5th one. But if you survived 1,000 steps, gravity would pull you down every single time. You're never going to step off the roof and keep walking. So gravity, there's a law of gravity. And there's a law that tells us, and it's just so common sense, there's a law that tells us life cannot come from non-life. This podium will never spring anything off of it. A single-celled life form or a human. Nothing is going to come from this. Promise.
Well, by definition, evolution is like changing, not starting.
Yeah.
I don't see how anybody can get out here and look at the
That's a good point.
world and come up with anything but there has to be a God.
There's been no new species.
There's right.
Species can't evolve. They can evolve. Yeah, they evolve.
Cannot evolve from one species to another. Evolving means changing. We're different now than we were in the 1800s. We're a little bit bigger, a little taller, fatter. I don't think that's not evolving. That's devolving. That's going the other way. But that's expanding. But things do change. That part of evolving is right. Things change. Things look different now than they did 100, 200 years ago. But the theory of evolution that it all started with one-celled animal, it somehow changed into this other thing, and then into this other thing, and then into this other thing, and then way, way, way down the line, 6,000 billion years later, here we are. That's the whole theory of evolution, is that species change and evolve from one to the other. But that still doesn't go back. Go back to the beginning, atheist. Primordial soup. What in the world? What was that? It was non-living. If it was a mud hole, there was nothing in it alive. It was water and dirt. Yeah. Well, they can't explain that. The atheist cannot explain life.
But there are some very, very intelligent seeming people who believe that there cannot be a God.
And a lot of those people, I'm convinced, believe that because they don't want to think there's something better than them. We are full of ourselves. We are full of ourselves as human beings. Look at us. Look what we have done. Look what we made. Look what we are. So many. Some people don't want to believe in a God that created because that takes a little bit away from us.
And even more so as a group like the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
We've got, Sherry and I have an example of Tower of Babel at the University of Texas. Is still, I believe, the largest university. But collectively, they are so smart that it was said to me by a relative that Christianity can't be spoken on campus.
Yeah, they're too intelligent for that. Okay, explain life. Here you go. Bring your 50,000 students, and all of you get your heads together. Explain life outside of God. Go ahead. Do it.
I've talked to people before, and most everybody that I've ever known had a religious background. But my family ran up against talking to someone that didn't have a religious background. And it is very hard to start the community. And Ed gave me a magazine that had an article in it about a man that was a minister that was on a train with a guy that was getting his PhD, and he was an atheist. And he told the minister he was an atheist, and they got into a discussion. And as you said, they look at the Bible like it's just another story.
Yeah.
And this man told how he talked to this young man, and he never quoted scripture to him. He started just like you are and asked him, how does anything come from nothing? How do we get life from matter?
Yeah, explain your explanation.
All the way home, and he never did preach to him like that. But his ending was, there has to be somebody behind this, and there has to be a book that gives how it happened. And the guy walked away. He asked him to meet with him, talk to him again, or do a Bible correspondence course, or some way or another to keep in touch, and he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
He said he hoped that he planted a seed of doubt in his atheistic mind.
So many people are, like I said, they're too smart. Can't think of a God. That's just not going to happen. And the intellectuals think they've got the answers, but they don't, because, as we said, if life did not come from God, then there was. Let's just talk about matter. There's problems even with matter. Science has, as I mentioned, science has not recorded any single instance where life came from anything that was not alive. Life breeds life. And all of these things that are not alive around us, rocks and dirt and, all these entities, they're not going to create life. It never has happened. And this is another problem they have. If something exists now, if they don't have an explanation for it being created, and they don't, they go the other route and say, well, it's always been here. It's always existed. Well, we know the second law of thermodynamics, as we talked about on Sunday, says that all this stuff's winding down, in particular the elements and the earth. It's winding down the energy that's available. So it hasn't always existed. Now, God has always existed, and we know that. But the universe and the earth that we live on and the things that we see and touch, it hasn't existed forever. It existed when God spoke it into existence. So these intellectual people are arguing against science. They're literally arguing against scientific laws. They're arguing against all this when they're trying to be intelligent and trying to prove that there isn't a God. So we know there is. In Hebrews 1, 10 and 12, I want to read these verses if you want to turn there. Hebrews 1, 10 through 12 tells us something very important. Here it says, "You, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. And they will all grow like an old garment. Like a cloak you will fold them up, and they will be changed. But you are the same, and your years will not fail." So the Bible told us a long time ago about this very law of thermodynamics, that things are failing, things are perishing little by little, but not God. The things He created and put in place, it's ticking down. So this idea that they would go to that, well, it's just always existed, it's always been here. Go back and pull up your science books and study the second law of thermodynamics again. You're so smart. Surely you had that in high school or college. Pull it back up. That can't happen. So then you have to go back to, well, something created it. Something did create. It hasn't existed always. There was a cause and effect. And that's another scientific principle. There's always a cause and an effect.
Nancy, people are so smart and intelligent. What are they going to do whenever they meet the end of the day?
Yeah.
You were taught this, but I didn't know. You were the smartest person to talk to one.
Yeah. Yeah, and sadly, that's when a lot of people are going to be educated, and it'll be too late. Everyone's knee will bow because God is that.
And they'll believe in that moment.
Yes, they will. They will believe. But getting them to believe now, when you can't go to the Bible and talk to an atheist. And fortunately, we live in a very religious area where most people do believe in God. I think we're probably maybe less here than the general 20%. Maybe we don't have that many, but there are some. And people are moving and coming here all the time, and it's just common sense that we would have more and more people come here who don't believe in God. And if you don't believe in God, you're atheist. Whether you call yourself atheist or not, you're atheist. You believe in God, theism, or you don't believe in God, atheism. So it's either one way or the other. But atheism cannot explain life. You can talk, they can talk, they can talk, they can talk. They can go to it just happened, or it's always been here. But none of that holds water. It doesn't hold water in their intellectual debate.
But if you ever convince an atheist of God, they will be tenacious enough.
Yeah, that's true.
At PPP last year, one of the most fascinating speakers was a fellow, PhD, doctor fellow, who had been an atheist.
Yep.
And he was fascinating.
There was I can't remember this guy's name. This was back, huh?
A guy named Clayton, very famous.
Clayton. It was in the early 80s.
Married a lady who's a member of the Church of Christ.
He was in the early 80s, devout atheist, disproving God at every corner. Well, in trying to disprove, he proved to himself, of course, and he obeyed the gospel, and then he went on the offensive. And he was out there then debating all these evolutionists who didn't believe in God, and he tore them up. I listened to some of his stuff back in the day, and he tore them up. I remember this one thing he did. I thought it was so smart, because he used that professor's intelligence against him. So when it was his turn, I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. When it was his turn, for the debate, because they all have rules and everything. He had a prosthesis up on the podium or the table wherever they were debating. And he got to ask his counterpart a question. He said, I have a question for you. What is that thing right there? And of course he was building him up. What is that? So the atheist, in all of his knowledge, went on to explain it. That's a lower limb prosthesis. It was made by a prosthetist who measured and took measurements of a limb and created this thing and put it together so that it can fit on someone's leg to sort of simulate what they lost, in their function. And they can use this prosthesis. He went on and on and on, just digging himself. They can use this prosthesis to get around pretty well. It doesn't function as well as the original leg, but it works pretty well. And this guy put it together to fit this person so that it would work. But it was made by a prosthetist orthotist. And then he let him rattle on with that for a while, and then he said, okay, very good. Now, what is this? And he had a picture up on the overhead of a human leg. He said, what is that? And he said, that's a human leg. You're not going to expand on that, sir? No, I don't have anything to say about that. Well, I got another question for you. Where did it come from? You just went into extreme detail laying out this prosthesis that is they're really pathetic substitutes for a limb. They work, and if you have one leg, you're glad to have one, but they pale woefully compared to just a normal old achy leg. So this guy went into great detail explaining how this guy made that. So who created this? Wouldn't answer. And he said, finally he kept on with him. He was like, please tell us, you're committed to answering the questions. It's your turn now. Where did this leg come from? And the guy had no other choice but to say, it just happened. So here this but I think it was that guy. John.
That kind of debate, though, it was a big famous debate that Scopes
Yeah.
monkey trials back in
Yeah.
the early 1900s.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
And that was very famous.
Yeah.
You talked about this human nature that where people want to be the most important thing. I read an article one time about astronomers, and there's this thing going on with the Hubble telescope. This is, I guess, real common in a lot of the academics, where somebody has a theory. They made a theory, and it's been their life's work. It's this theory of how things are, and they use whatever to prove it, or hypothesize it. And they basically want their theory to stand at least as long as they're around. So these people actually block other astronomers who want time on the telescope to look at things that would disprove their theory.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll actually block them and try and keep them from having access to it, just so they can keep their theory
So they can keep that yeah.
long enough for them to pass away.
And that's what intellectuals have done forever. I'm glad you mentioned theory and hypothesis. We mentioned a law of thermodynamics. There's other laws. A law is something that's pretty much irrefutable. It's been reproduced. It's going to happen every single time. So a law is set. The laws cannot be modified. They happen. The next step down is a theory. A theory is just something that people have studied on and looked at things, and stuff might point toward that direction, but a theory is not a law. Laws are set. So you've got all these scientific laws that this theory of evolution tries to throw out the window. Well, a theory cannot trump and supersede laws. The law of gravity is going to happen. The law of thermodynamics, things are winding down energy-wise, that's going to happen. So the theory of evolution really tries to chop the legs off laws. Because in order for that to happen, these laws have to be somehow painted shady. And then there's the next thing down that's just called a hypothesis, and that's just a guess. They call it an educated guess, but sometimes I wonder if it's even educated. But you've got these hypotheses. Well, I think, that's basically a hypothesis. Well, I think this is maybe what happened. And then a theory, there's usually a little bit of evidence maybe toward it, but then the laws, they're set. These laws are set and they can't be changed. So if you think about the theory of evolution, I honestly don't think it even fits the definition of a theory. It's a hypothesis. If you look at all these definitions, the theory of evolution, there's not enough evidence there for it to even be a theory. It's a hypothesis. It's a guess that these people are throwing out there to try to explain God away. So now so we've talked about atheism can't explain morality. It certainly can't explain life. And it can't explain the universe. So somebody mentioned earlier, what do the intellectuals tell us happened to start all this stuff? There's a comedy show named after it. What is it called? The Big Bang Theory. No, it's not. The Big Bang Hypothesis. Quit calling it a theory. There's no reproducible evidence in any form whatsoever.
Anytime they mention it, they have no explanation of what caused it.
So talk about the bang. They're saying a bang happened and all this matter spread out. Some of them became planets. Some of them became moons, stars, whatever. But all this stuff just bang, boom, and out it went. So what's wrong with that hypothesis right off the bat? There was matter there that banged, and it went this direction and that direction. What's right? Huh? Matter is not eternal. Matter existed when God created it. So that's their first big problem right there. Where did the matter come from? Forget the bang. Forget the bang. There was no bang. There was God said. Huh? You know, if we were still evolving, you know, it went to amoeba, to this, to monkeys, to us. Don't you think we would have gotten a little better by now? Surely, you know, we would have. But where did the matter come from to bang? Go ahead, explain it. Was it eternal? Wrong. Second law of thermodynamics, intellectual, it's still there. Second law of thermodynamics, matter is not eternal. So matter did not always exist. It existed when God created it. So even if matter was there and it wasn't, a bang that would cause that type of reaction through all that matter, what caused that? How can you get if that's what happened, and if that's what you want to believe and teach, how can you get something that we would think of as pretty catastrophic if everything just exploded and went off in billions of pieces? So let's forget about matter. Matter is not eternal, so there was no matter there to bang. But let's say, for your argument's sake, matter was there. What banged it? What exploded it? What sent it off millions and millions and millions of miles in every direction? What did that? Exactly. If there wasn't any matter to exist, there couldn't have been anything of a force of that nature, that much energy. So they can't explain where the matter came from because it's not eternal, and there's nothing else there to create it, they say. No, nobody created it. It was just kind of, you know. You ever had somebody try to explain something to you and they didn't know what they were talking about and they just keep saying more and more words thinking? That's kind of what they do.
They come up with dark matter to explain why the calculations don't work in the matter balance equation.
Yeah, I mean, they can come up with all kinds of things for their limitations, but matter didn't exist forever. The force that created was God. And God has existed forever. So there you go. God is eternal. Eternal. So when He decided to create, He said it. Let there be light. Let there be a division in the firmaments. He just had to say it.
The stars, the sun and moon come from that.
They banged and went different directions. They all went their separate ways. But they can't explain where matter came from, and they can't explain the force that would have channeled that reaction. So the Big Bang Theory, it might be a funny little TV show about some nerds, but it ain't right. The theory, the Big Bang Theory, they cannot explain how things came into existence. Every effect has to have a cause. Where's a toy come from? A toy, a little kid's toy. Toy maker. A toy maker makes a toy. Where's a shoe come from? Don't say Taiwan. China. That's where they come from. God, shoe cobblers. They come from Walmart. Well, yeah, Walmart's always existed, so they've got it. Somebody makes that shoe. Where does your watch come from? That intricate piece of thing that tells you time. So somebody makes that watch. Might as well. Put them in a bag, shake them up, there's your watch. What about the house you live in, atheist? Did it just come in existence a few years ago? Were you just waiting on it and there it is? Did you buy some wood and throw it out there on the ground? And, huh? You got to water it and then it'll grow. Where'd your house come from? Somebody built that house. Where did the universe come from? Someone created that universe. An entity, a supernatural, all-powerful, all-knowing, eternal being created the universe. Where did man and woman come from? Not monkeys. Where did the monkeys come from? Where did the amoeba come from? God created everything. And for those who don't believe in God, I think it does serve us well if they're friends or their neighbors or coworkers. I do think it serves us well to force their hand in explaining nicely, hey, I hear you're an atheist. No, do you believe in God? No, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God. There ain't no God. And so, that's an easy conversation to start. Well, how are you here? How are we talking? Where did you come? Where did you come from, huh? Our next couple of lessons, Lord willing, will be on our body and some of the amazing, just mind-boggling things that our body is. And you want to tell me that came from that one cell to a two cell to are you crazy? Or do you think I'm crazy?
Are they waiting on, how long is it going to be before the apes are going to evolve in?
Well, they don't have to. They already conquered us on that series, Planet of the Apes. They got better and smarter than us and they took over. Y'all remember that? Y'all remember that? Charlton Heston? That scared me to death when I was a little dude.
There's an article from the Christian Chronicle on John Clinton and how he evolved.
He did evolve. He did change.
From an atheist to he taught science.
Mm-hmm.
And then after he retired from teaching for 41 years, he went around the country teaching how science proves
Yes,
God.
it does.
But there's another young man who is doing just that same thing right now.
Right.
He works at apologetics class.
Well, creation matches up perfectly with science. It ain't creation or science. It all matches up. And those who don't believe in God, they have to just throw a lot of science out the window and say, well, yeah, I know that pesky little second law of thermodynamics is there, and I know usable energy in our matter is winding down, but that doesn't fit my narrative, so I'm going to kind of just minimize that. So they have to just butcher science.
Speaking of butchering, one of their latest theories is that we may all just be living in a big simulation.
Yeah, the Matrix. We're all in that movie. Well, go ahead.
Creation is taught in its fullness, it makes much more sense.
Yes, it does.
But if you take it and you only take pieces
Right.
out, and you maybe say, well, there's heaven, but there's not a hell, and God just loves everybody. When you start ordering it all out, then it doesn't make sense, which is why a lot of people don't believe in God. When it is taught in its fullness, it makes absolute sense.
That's a great point, and we want to get in the Bible with folks. And a good way to do that with those who don't believe in God is get them questioning their ideas. You know, and these 3 points, I mean, that's just something we can keep in our toolbox. So you don't believe in God? What about morality? Or, you know, what about us? What about the universe? What's your explanation for that? I'd be interested. And we have to do it in kindness and love. You know, in class we can be kind of more, you know, like that's ridiculous kind of thing. But when we're talking to somebody and we say, I'd love to hear your explanation of how we're here. How are you and I here talking right now? Tell me what you think. And be able to get doubt in their minds so they may be willing to listen to an alternate explanation, the Bible. And the Bible explains to us perfectly how things happened and through God, and matches up with science all the way through. There's nothing that's taught in the Bible that conflicts with true science, with things that are to the point of theories. There's nothing that conflicts. But appreciate y'all's comments. We only had, we got finished. Lord willing, we'll try to look at some evidences on our body, on how wonderful God's creation is in creating us. Some days we don't feel like that, but we are incredibly and awesomely made. And it's mind-baffling to think about how everything... I saw a video, and it was on the internet, so it's got to be true. But I'm going to share that with you. I think it's true, a lot of the stuff. And it's called, What Would Happen? God created everything. God created all the elements, including oxygen. What would happen if we were oxygen deprived? The universe was oxygen deprived for 5 seconds. We'll try to get into that one of the next couple of classes, maybe next one down the road. But just when I read that, it was just mind-boggling. And all of it made true to me. It made sense to me, in a scientific manner. If we were without oxygen, the element didn't exist for just 5 seconds, we wouldn't suffocate. All of you can hold your breath 5 seconds, right?
How many seconds?
5. Can you hold your breath 5 seconds?
That seemed on the short.
Well, but the point is, it wouldn't affect us in breathing, but it would cause a collapse of everything we know. I'll read that through to you. It's just amazing. And God knew that. That's why we have oxygen. That's an element He created. So we'll look at the body and things that God created and how amazing He did that. Yes, sir.
Jesus answered Satan about turning the stones into bread, and He said that man does not live by bread alone, but by every breath that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Jesus is stating that each breath you take is the expressed will of God, that you're not going to take your next breath except that God will.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We are not promised the next breath. But thank y'all.